Hare Krishna, a very warm welcome to all the dear devotees on our program on Srimad Bhagavatam study. Today we are continuing our discussion on the 15th chapter of the first canto. We have discussed this chapter in previous two classes. You can watch those classes on YouTube. The recording is available. And today we are continuing this discussion from 36th verse onwards to 51st verse, which is the last verse of this chapter. And if time will permit, we will also uh, try to enter into the 16th chapter, and we'll see if we can discuss some first few verses of the 16th chapter later after we finish this 15th chapter. The title is The Pandavas Retire Timely. Overall, this is our 40th class. Today's Mangalacharan prayers are by Anupama Mataji, and I'm not sure whether Mataji is available in the class today. No, I cannot see Mataji. Uh,
I can
anyone?
do, Prabhuji.
Okay, Rakeshji, you would like to take this? Okay, please go ahead.
ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोऽस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे.
Very nice. Kindly continue, Prabhuji.
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्यत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नष्टकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः.
Very nice, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Excellent. Very nicely recited. Now we move to the next agenda of our class, which is the recap of the previous class. So the summary you might have received was done by Jivan Radha Govind Prabhuji. Prabhuji is a disciple of His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, and a very, very sincere and I would say enthusiastic uh, participants in our classes. So very warm welcome to Jivan Prabhu. Prabhuji, please can you help us recap the previous class?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. First of all, I would like to thank our Siksha Guru Keshav Gopal Prabhuji for giving me this opportunity to make the presentation of the recap of the last class. I also want to say Hare Krishna to all our devotee participants. Recap of class number 39. Verses covered, verse number 18 to 35 of chapter 15, Canto 1, titled The Pandavas Retire Timely. After departure of Lord Krishna to his spiritual abode, the happenings in the Pandavas families is described in this chapter. Verses 1 to 6 describe Arjuna's feeling of separation from Lord Krishna, and in verses 7 to 17, Arjuna recalls Lord Krishna's favors and intimate protection to the Pandavas. These were covered in previous classes. Now let us get into the verses 18 to 35, which were covered in the last class. In verses 18 to 23, Arjuna remembers intimate moments with Lord Krishna and he feels void. In verses 24 to 31, Arjuna focuses on Lord's instructions during Kurukshetra war, that is Bhagavad Gita messages, and he attains transcendence. These verses are the highlight of this chapter, and we get number of takeaway spiritual points, and these points are beautifully brought out elaborately in the purport of Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. In the next section, verses 32 to 35, King Yudhishthira desires to retire. Now, let us actually, I have given a brief heading of the thing and where the heading and whatever items are covered, I have given in that. Now, let us go by verse and then see the meanings. In verse 18, Arjuna remembers Lord's frank talks, smiles, and hearty addresses and feels overwhelmed. In verse 19, Arjuna mentions that Lord Krishna tolerated all his offenses, even in those when his value was minimized, and he was intimate like a father to a son or a friend to a friend. In verse number 20, in verse 20, Arjuna mentions that his heart became void, having been separated from his most well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in his absence, he further mentions that he has been defeated by a number of infidel cowherd men while he was guarding the bodies of the Queen of Lord. In this connection, the story from Brahma Purana and Vishnu Purana concerning Ashtavakra Muni and denizens of heaven was also narrated by Prabhuji in the class. Now let us go to verse number 21. In verse number 21, Arjuna mentions in this verse that even a moment of absence of Lord is like offering ghee into ashes. There is a comparison given. Obtaining money by a magician, sowing seeds on barren land. Though he is the same Arjuna with the same Gandiva bow, chariot, arrows, and horses. Here I would like to, each sloka, I have made some Prabhupada's points also, and I would like to give them in brief. Prabhupada's purport, one should not be puffed up by borrowed plumes. All energies and powers are derived from the Supreme Lord Krishna, and they act as long as he desires, and cease to function as soon as he withdraws. Analogy of a powerhouse supplying power to the bulb was also explained in the class by Prabhuji. Verses 22 and 23. Arjuna mentions in these verses how the Yadus were cursed by Brahmanas, become intoxicated and kill each other. Then verses 24 to 31. Actually, this section forms the heart of this chapter. And in Arjuna focuses on Lord's instruction during Kurukshetra war. This is covered in verses 24 to 27. And he is attaining transcendence in stages he is brought out in verses 28 to 31. Now let us go verse by verse. Verse 24, Arjuna expresses his staunch belief on the supreme will of the Lord. He expresses that people sometimes kill and sometimes protect one another, and all this is due to the will of the Lord, that is Ishwarasya Vicheshtitam. Prabhupada's purport. According to anthropologists, there is a nature's law of a struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. That they do not know that behind the law of nature is the supreme direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. Any action is judged by Lord's pleasure or displeasure. There is no room for personal whims. Karmasu yogaha karmasu kaushalam. This is the thing from Bhagavad Gita, which means we must be guided by the pleasure of the Lord. Next, let us go to verses 25 and 26. Verses 20, in these verses, removing the burden of the earth is the topic which is brought out in these verses, and this is being explained by means of an analogy. As the big aquatics swallows the small aquatics, the Lord engage the stronger Yadus to kill the weaker. This was because Yadus had become a burden on the earth. Bhubharan. Prabhupada's purport. Amongst the Yadus were the Lord's eternal associates and also some demigods who were in Sattva-guna. Both were not a burden for the earth. They were actually ornaments for the earth, just as a woman does not feel the burden of her ornaments. Therefore, the destruction of the Yadus was the means for returning the demigods and the Lord's eternal associates to their respective destinations. Verse number 29. In this verse, Arjuna is overwhelmed with emotion. He is glorifying Bhagavad Gita messages. He is trying to take shelter of the instructions of Bhagavad Gita in the absence of the Lord. These messages teach us what we should do in case we become morose at any point of time in our life. Prabhupada's purport. Actually, this is one of the, there are 3 pages of purport in this, this is a very excellent purport. And some of the salient points which was explained by Prabhuji in the class, I have picked up and I would like to narrate them. Prabhupada has glorified Bhagavad Gita messages in these three pages. Gita's instructions, and point number 1, Gita's instruction messages are for the entire humanity, that is old, retired, youngster, neophyte, all castes and creed, and the message is universal. Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic philosophy. It is also called Gita Upanishad, which can be used at all times. Point number 3, the message which is relevant at the time of war, that is critical time, is relevant to all situations and times. Next point is, the messages teach us not only how to be successful in life, but also how to deal with the failures in our life. Bhagavad Gita's message is not different from the Lord, and the message is having the same effect on Lord when the Lord is absent. Finally, the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to bring everyone close to the Lord. Verses 28 to 31 explain how Arjuna is getting settled in transcendence in stages. That is stage 1, verse 28. Arjuna contemplated deeply on Lord Krishna's lotus feet and his instructions with intimacy and friendship. Sauhardena atigadena. His mind becomes pacified and becomes free from unsteadiness. The Sanskrit words are Shantachit and Vimalamati. Verse number 29. In this verse, Arjuna's, this is the next stage, Arjuna's remembrance of Vasudeva's lotus feet intensifies his bhakti, and thus the contamination in his thoughts get subsided. Prabhupada's purport. The word for subsiding of this thing is described by the word trash. Prabhupada in his purport says the material desire, that is lakpi, lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and envy are the trash for material contamination, which impedes the spiritual growth. This can be avoided by devotee association, by constant chanting of the Lord and also hearing Lord's pastimes. Verse number 30. In this verse, Arjuna remembers Krishna's instructions on the battlefield, that is Bhagavad Gita's messages, which he forgot neither through time nor actions, nor the darkness of separation from the Lord Krishna. Prabhupada's purport. Arjuna had no desire to fight with his relatives, but he fought for the mission of the Lord. He was always engaged in the execution of his mission only, and therefore, after Lord's departure, he remained in the same transcendental position. Therefore, for us, one should therefore adjust the activities of life in pace with the mission of the Lord, and by doing this, one is sure to return home back to Godhead. Verse number 31. This verse describes the result of Arjuna becoming transcendentally situated. Due to his spiritual asset, that is Krishna's friendship, Arjuna discharged his lamentation, Vishoko Brahma Sampatya, and vanquished all doubts. Sanchinta Dvaita Shamshayaha. He became free from the modes of material nature. He got firmly situated in transcendence, devoid of material form, Alingatva, and was no longer entangled in birth and death. Verses 32 to 38, this is the last section where Maharaja Yudhishthira retires. Verse 32, upon hearing all this, Yudhishthira decides to go back home, back to Godhead. Verse 33, hearing Arjuna, Kunti Maharani also becomes absorbed in Krishna with full attention, Ekanta Bhaktya, and she also gained release from material existence. Verses 34 and 35. These verses explain how the Lord caused the members of Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies using an analogy thorn by thorn. Pick a thorn by this thing, by thorn. Verse 35 explains that Lord Krishna caused the Yadus to relinquish and relieve the burden of the world like one picks out a thorn with another thorn. The explanation is like this. There were two burdens. One, the burden on the earth in the form of demons. Two, the burden of the devotees in the form of Yadavas. Both were regarded as the same by the Lord, Samam Ishituhu. Then verse number 35 mentions that Lord manifests various bodies and apparently relinquishes them to accept honor ones, like Matsya and Matsya avatars, etc. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for the patient hearing. In fact, because I have included Prabhupada's purports, my the presentation has become a little lengthier. I hope
That is okay.
lengthier.
Yeah.
And I just, because it was one of the opportunity for me to this particular portion, it contains a lot of Prabhupada's instructions on the messages, Bhagavad Gita messages. I feel it is not correct on my part to miss at least some of the points in my presentation. So I have taken a little more time. I am very sorry for that.
No
And I
worries.
thank Prabhuji for once again for giving me this opportunity. I thank all the participants who gave a patient hearing. Thank you. Thank you everyone. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you, Jeevan Prabhu. Because I have been noticing that the devotees actually like to speak more. So this is also one of the reasons we have now trying to take one more initiative to organize presentations where we will give the topics to the class devotees, and they will get more time, like 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And in that time period, they will be able to express them a little more. So we will start them soon. I've started to work out some of the initial arrangements, what we need to do for that. So soon you will receive an invitation where we'll not have a regular class, but we will have presentation by various devotees who have given their name for such presentation. This is mainly to satisfy the desire of devotees to speak more about Lord Krishna and his devotees. Okay, so we move to the next agenda item, which is continue our discussion on the 15th chapter. Now you just now heard the discussion or the recap of the previous class, so which is up to verse number 35, so which is the second last section of this chapter. Now we will move from 36th verse onwards till the end of the chapter. So we will finish our discussion on more discussion points on Yudhishthir Maharaj retiring. So there are several very good points in this particular section. And then other Pandavas, Draupadi and Vidura, also depart. We will also cover this. So we will cover these in the 15th chapter, and most likely, if time permits, we will enter into 16th chapter as well. Okay, so we start. So who all would like to volunteer today for reading the text? Today there are no Sanskrit verses, so should be a bit more simpler to read. Who all would like to join us in the reading the text?
I can do, Prabhuji.
Okay, so
Prabhuji, I can do also.
Rakesh ji is there, Anand Prada Mata ji is there. Okay, we will start with Rakesh ji. Prabhuji, please read.
When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge.
So when the personality of God had left, then the Kali started to manifest fully. So if you recall, we had discussed this point in the past also. It was regarding when Yudhishthir Maharaj started observing changes in the society in general. He would notice that people are now cheating the other people. There are other symptoms of Kali Yuga also he was able to see among his subjects. Now this is being confirmed here. This is being confirmed when the personality of God had left. From that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared means uh, so Kali was already there when at the end of the Kurukshetra war. So when the Kurukshetra war ended, Kali already had appeared on the planet Earth. But because Lord Krishna was still present after the Kurukshetra war, it had not fully manifested or it had not shown its influence. But now, when Lord has left the planet, Kali became fully manifest. Fully manifest. And then it created inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with poor fund of knowledge. So, what does it mean? Inauspicious condition for those who are endowed with poor fund of knowledge means that those who are not in God consciousness, those who don't understand the nitty gritty details of how to become God consciousness, how to attain God consciousness. So for those people, Kali have an impact. Kali will impact and influence those who are not in that state of mind. So it is something very similar that in a pandemic, those people who are not vaccinated will have the highest chance of getting polluted or getting infected by the pandemic. So similarly, God consciousness is something like a vaccine for us. If we remain in God consciousness, then uh, we can be protected by the evil influence of Kali Yuga. So this is what we need to understand from this verse. Yes, Prabhu. Next one. Please read the 37th verse, Prabhu.
Maharaj Yudhishthir was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital, state, home, and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly.
So here you can see the important point in this particular verse is that Maharaj Yudhishthir had been ruling the kingdom of Hastinapur for quite some time, and as per the instruction of Narad Muni, uh, as soon as he understood that the Lord has departed, and there was instruction from Narad Muni that Lord has completed his project, he will soon depart, and as soon as he depart, you also start preparing to depart. So Yudhishthir Maharaj did not think twice of renouncing his well-established kingdom. As soon as the Lord departed, he knew the instructions of Narad Muni, and he also understood that I also now have to depart. He did not think twice. He uh, showed sufficient renunciation to leave his kingdom behind, and to renounce and depart from this world. So this is something which Prabhupada mentions in the purport, that this Kali Yuga has already started 5,000 years ago. The total duration of Kali Yuga is 4,32,000 years, but still 4,27,000 years are still remaining. So we have long way to go in Kali Yuga, but with the renunciation spirit of Yudhishthir Maharaj, we have a lesson to learn. We can see that in the modern society these days, the leaders of the society, specifically these political leaders, we see every now and then we hear the news that uh, that the political leader is not willing to relinquish the post despite losses, despite every kind of indication that they should actually leave. Their age is getting older. They are getting older, maybe in their 80s or in their 90s and so on, but still they continue to hold on to their seat, their position. Even not only in political leadership, even in the families also we see that. We see that the older generation, because of their attachment to the family, because of their attachment to the assets in the family, they continue to hold on to onto their position. They are not willing to relinquish that. Uh, so uh, here, from the example of Yudhishthir Maharaj, we need to understand that at the right moment, at the right time, we should uh, we should show sufficient detachment from the family life, detachment from this material life, and should relinquish and renounce in a very timely manner. So that is the main message from this verse. We go to the next one, 38th. Please, Prabhu.
Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas.
Yeah. So renunciation also has a responsibility. The person who is renouncing the family life is to not to uh, uh, leave behind family in trouble. So when he or she renounces the family life, he handovers the affairs of the family life, or in this case we are talking of Yudhishthir Maharaj. So in this case it is the kingdom of Hastinapur into able hands. So for that we need to have sufficient succession planning. Before we retire, before we relinquish our duties, we should prepare and develop a proper successor, and in the hands of that successor we need to renounce our family life, and hand over that kingdom to that particular successor. So we also see a similar point in the 39th verse. Please read, Prabhu.
Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura as the king of Shurasena. Afterwards, Maharaj Yudhishthir performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire of quitting household life.
Yeah, just wait one second here. So if we see that 38th and 39th verse, a similar theme has been repeated. In 38th verse, it is being mentioned that the kingdom of Hastinapur was handed over to Parikshit Maharaj, and then the kingdom of Mathura, uh, the kingdom was handed over to Vajranabh. Vajranabh is the great grandson of Lord Krishna. So Aniruddha is the grandson of Lord Krishna, and Vajranabh is the son of Aniruddha. So he becomes the great grandson of Lord Krishna. And then Maharaj Yudhishthir performed some Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself in the fire for quitting his household life. Now, here we need to understand that when we retire from our duties as a householder or as a leader, uh, we need to empower the other personality also, or the successor also. We need to empower. So there is a difference between empowerment and delegation. Delegation means we ourselves remain in power, but we delegate the part of some job or some work or some duty to the subordinate. But empowerment means we actually completely come out from the scene. We are out from the scene, and now we empower the other person to take over the affairs of the kingdom or family and so on. It means empowerment actually means to give full autonomy to the successor to make independent decision, and to give all that independent decision making power to the other person. And the other person may have different thoughts, different ideas to make that decision, but we need to have that much renunciation that we should be detached from that position to give that empowerment to the other person. Delegation, on the other hand, simply means to assign some work. So those leaders who are insecure, they actually like to delegate rather than empowering others. When we empower others, it may happen that our subordinate may make some mistake, make some bad decision, or make some wrong decision. So it is also okay sometime for the person or the leader who is renouncing his position to allow the other person to make some bad decision or to make some mistakes. It is part of the empowerment process. Uh, so it should not be that the leader should always continue to micromanage the successor. That is not actually empowerment. Uh, so empowerment means giving full autonomy, full decision making power, independent decision making power to the other person. And here we see the renunciation spirit of Yudhishthir Maharaj, that in Hastinapur he gave it to uh, Parikshit Maharaj, and in Mathura, in Shur Sena, he gave it to Vajranab. So uh, Prabhupada in the purport makes some more points in this context, and Prabhupada is saying that everyone in their life, they should at least keep 15-20 years of their life uh, fully dedicated in the service of the Lord. So for example, these days maybe we can expect that the life duration or expectancy is around maybe 80 years or maybe 75 years. So it is very much expected that if we can give our 15-20 years of our life, expecting that we will probably live maybe up to 75 years or maybe 80 years, then maybe we should start renouncing our activities from the age of 60 or maybe 65, and try to make an attempt that last 10, 15, 20 years we give dedicated in the service of the Lord, to develop as much as God consciousness, as much as Krishna consciousness, before we leave this body. It is foolish to spend 100% of the life in fruitive activities, in materialistic activities. Sometimes we see in the household that the grandfather is saying that I will want to see the marriage of my grandson or maybe great grandson, and then his children also I would like to see. That is not something which is nice. So here in that respect, renunciation spirit of Yudhishthira Maharaj is exemplary. He is ready to leave at the moment's notice. He is ready to leave at the moment's notice. And something very similar we see in other kings, in other Raj Rishis also in Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, Parikshit Maharaj also renounced at a moment's notice. Dhruv Maharaj also renounced at a moment's notice. Similarly, Dhruv Maharaj's father Uttanpad also renounced at a moment's notice. So they uh, they actually nurtured their right successor, and when the right time came, they renounced and went to the forest for their higher purposes of life. Now, please read, Prabhu, the 40th one.
Maharaj Yudhishthir at once relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments of the royal order and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything.
Completely became disinterested and unattached to everything. Immediately took the dress up of a renunciate, like you can see in the picture. So That is the exemplary renunciation spirit of Yudhishthir Maharaj, the Vedic king. Okay, move to the next one, Prabhu, 41st.
Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, then the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the five elements, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life,
Okay, continue with 42, Prabhu.
thus annihilating the gross body of five elements into the three qualitative modes of material nature. He merged them in one nescience and then absorbed that nescience in the self, Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances.
Yeah. Now you will see that this verse number 41 and 42 are very, very technical in nature. Here there is a process being described that how Yudhishthir Maharaj left this planet. So it is mentioned he amalgamated his sense organs. Now sense organs are these eyes, nose, ear, tongue, etc. into the mind. Then the mind into the life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the five elements. Five elements means earth, air, water, and so on, and his body into death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. And then continues in the 42nd verse, thus annihilating the gross body of five elements into the three qualitative modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. He merged them in one nations and then absorbed that nations in the self, that is Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. Now you will see this is quite complicated, quite technical, and I will try to make it as simple as possible for you. More on this topic we will discuss in canto number 2. And what are we going to discuss in canto number 2? In canto number 2 we are going to discuss the process of creation. Process of creation means when a universe is created, how that universe gets created. So it is mentioned that the universe actually, when the creation happens, the Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu, actually breathe out. And when he breathes out, then millions of universes actually comes out from the pore of his body. Uh, And when these universes come out from the pore of his body, they actually come out in the seed form, which is known as Pradhan. Which is known as Pradhan. With the passage of some time, this Pradhan becomes Mahat Tattva. And what is this Mahat Tattva? Mahat Tattva is something like, you can call it as an ingredient using which the universe is actually created. Now, from this Mahat Tattva comes Ahankar. And from this Ahankar comes three modes, which is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And from these three modes, there are different things that come out, like five material elements, five sense objects, senses, intelligence, mind, and so on. So you can see there is a sequence of this creation. So what is the sequence? First of all, Pradhan comes, then Mahat Tattva comes, then Ahankar comes, then the three modes comes, then different other elements like five material elements, uh, then five sense objects, then senses, intelligence, mind, like this. So there is a particular sequence that actually comes when the creation happens. Similarly, when annihilation happens, the process is in the reverse order. Process in the reverse order. So that reverse order actually is being briefly mentioned here in these verses. And what is the reverse order? The sense organs get amalgamated into the mind. Now how that happens, that I don't know, that I'm not aware, but broadly speaking, this is how it happens. The sense organs goes into the mind, and the mind goes into the life goes into the breathing, and so on. Ultimately, you see here the five element goes into the three qualitative modes of material nature, and these modes of material nature, they are merged into one nations, which is like maybe Mahat Tattva, and then absorb that nations into the self, which is Brahman, and Brahman is no other than Lord Vishnu. So ultimately it comes out from Lord Vishnu as Pradhan, Mahat Tattva, and so on. And when it annihilates, it actually goes back once again in the reverse order, that Mahat Tattva becomes Pradhan, and Pradhan get actually absorbed into Brahman, which is nothing but Lord Vishnu. So which is inexhaustible. So this is how we need to understand this little technical and a bit complicated verse. Okay, then we move to the next one, 43rd. Please read, Prabhuji.
After that, Maharaj Yudhishthir dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deep man, he heard nothing.
Yeah. Now it is being mentioned here that the state of mind or the state of consciousness of Maharaj Yudhishthir is actually being mentioned here. So what is being said here is that he dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily become dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. So ultimately, with what these lines are being suggesting here is that he stopped all kind of material activities, all kind of material activities. He stopped thinking himself as a king. He stopped thinking himself as a king. Like for example, we have false ego. We talk about ahankar. uh, Man buddhi ahankar. Now what is this ahankar? Ahankar means false identity. False identity means right now I am probably thinking that I am Indian. Indian means that I am a citizen of a country called India. That is my identity. Or I am thinking that I am probably uh, a family member of a particular dynasty. Maybe I'm coming from some Gupta dynasty, or maybe from Sharma dynasty, or maybe something like that. Or maybe I'm a cricketer, or maybe I'm a Hindu, or maybe I'm a Muslim, like that. So we have this ahankar. Ahankar means we are identifying ourselves with some identity. Here, what is being mentioned in this verse is that Yudhishthir Maharaj actually gave up all his identities as a king, as a brother, as a husband, everything, as a resident of a particular country. He gave all kind of identities. And the only identity he understood was that he is the servant of the Lord. He is the he is the servant of the Lord, of Lord Krishna. That is the only identity he understood. So even he did not depend on his brothers for anything. So you have seen in the previous classes also mentioned time to time that Yudhishthir Maharaj ruled his kingdom with the support of his brothers, four brothers. Every time he would have to make some decision, he will consult with them, or for different tasks, he will take their help, their opinion, and so on. Now here, he did not depend on his brothers for anything. Again, a very strong message in this verse, that in our spiritual life, ultimately, finally, uh, ultimately, at the end of the day, it is our own self who has to take charge, ownership of our own spiritual life. In our spiritual life, we talk a lot about association, association of devotees, reading books, etc., etc., association of our spiritual master, and so many other things. So we in our spiritual life are actually uh, uh, also take shelter or support from people around us, resources around us, which are devotional in nature. But here, at the end of the life, when he is about to leave and reach the Supreme Lord, the supreme destination, he did not depend on his brothers for anything. So ultimately, Prabhupada, I will read that purport point also later in the class also. Prabhupada mentions in the purports later that ultimately everyone has to fly his own plane. Everyone has to fly his own plane. Although throughout our spiritual journey, there are others who will support us in our growth, but at the end of the day, finally we have to take charge of our responsibility of our own spiritual progress. So that is something which we need to understand. So here, no dependence on the brothers. He became fully fearless and independent. Fully fearless and independent. So he and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. So uh, it is another point that we can discuss here is that most of the time in our spiritual life we have to chant our own holy name, like 16 rounds Prabhupada has recommended. So it is not that we can delegate the chanting of 16 rounds to 4 different people. Say, hey, Mr. A, you chant 4 rounds for me. Mr. B, you chant 4 rounds for me. Mr. C, you chant 4 rounds for us. Mr. D, you chant four. No, we have to take responsibility and do the chanting ourselves. So that is something which we need to understand. Although there are other people who will help us, guide us, but ultimately we have to fly our own plane. Okay. Next one, Prabhu.
He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he lived in that way wherever he went.
Hmm. So this is now being mentioned that, like his forefathers, he took the same path. He completely devoted himself to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is something which is his consciousness. He gave up all false designation as a king and so on, but and completely gave himself to the thought of Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. Wherever he went, he lived in that way. So he completely took to Krishna consciousness, and then he left his body, or then he left this world. Okay. Yes.
The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother.
So now in 44th verse, the description is mainly for Maharaj Yudhishthir. In the 45th verse, the description starts for the other brothers, the other Pandavas. The younger brother of Maharaj Yudhishthir observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of the elder brothers. So what they did, the same thing what Yudhishthir Maharaj did, he immediately started becoming Krishna conscious, completely fully relinquished his material designations. Similarly, the younger brothers also had to do the same thing independently, without any external support. External support was there till the point they were doing all this, but now the time has come to leave. Again, there is no external support. Now we have to fly our own plane. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport that sometimes people don't exactly know what they need to do after retirement. They retire maybe from their job, and various other things, various other activities, but they don't really know what are we supposed to do after retirement. Some people start to maybe uh, have some pet dogs, or maybe cats, or maybe they start to do some charitable activities, or maybe they take up another job after retirement to keep themselves busy. But this is from the example of Yudhishthir Maharaj and the Pandavas, the 4 brothers. We understand that the whole sole purpose of retirement is mainly to develop God consciousness. This is what exactly all these people are doing here. Yudhishthir Maharaj and Pandavas, they are simply trying to develop, dedicated themselves to the supreme goal, that is their devotional service to the Supreme Lord. That is what they are supposed to do. So the objective of retirement is to develop Krishna consciousness as much as possible, whatever opportunity we have. Okay. Now we request Anand Prada Mataji to kindly help us recite the text.
Sure, Prabhuji. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Um, they all had performed all the principles of religion and as a result rightly decided that the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna, Sri Krishna, are the supreme goal of all. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption.
Yeah. So they all had performed all the principles of religion. Huh? So today also we discussed in our Sanskrit shloka memorization workshop class What was that second verse? The 13th verse. Atah pumbir dvuja shrestha varnashrama vibhagasha swanishthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshana. So varnashrama vibhagasha. So they had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna are the supreme goal of all. So very similar to what we discussed today in the shloka memorization class. They had done all these pious activities in their previous lives, in this life also. And a result of that pious activity is what? The result of that pious activity is this realization that ultimately we have to work, we have to live for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. That is what is the ultimate purpose. So, if you read Srimad Bhagavad Gita's 7th chapter, 28th verse, it mentions that those who have done pious deeds in their previous and in this life, they only can attain Lord's lotus feet. So, uh, coming to the platform of bhakti, coming to the platform of this realization that Vasudevam Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha. And in order to attain that kind of consciousness, one must have done a lot of pious activities in the previous lives and in this life. So, Pandavas were actually pious people. Hence, they could focus easily their mind on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Yeah. But if for some reason our piety has not completely manifested, we are still attracted to the rules of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, then we may not immediately be attracted to the lotus feet of the Lord, but we continue to do our dharma, artha, kama, and moksha activities, and slowly we will develop that much kind of piety so that we can actually one fine day develop attraction for the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So this is the purpose here. This is the discussion here in this verse, which is very similar to verse number 13 of the second chapter of the first canto, where it mentions Atah pumbir dvija shrestha varnashrama vibhagasha swanishthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshunam. A very similar theme in this verse. So when we follow the duties of varnashram vibhaga, we actually become purified, and with that purification of our heart that reaches to a certain level, we develop attraction for the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. That is the whole idea. Okay. So there are two verses now, 47 and 48. Mataji, please continue.
Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayan, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord Sri Krishna, known as Golok Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same body.
So there are four lines in this verse. We will try to meditate or reflect a little bit on each of these lines one by one. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attained the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by Supreme Narayan, Lord Krishna. Here it is being mentioned by pure consciousness. And how did they achieve this pure consciousness? It is mentioned by constant devotional remembrance. Constant devotional remembrance. Now, this should remind us of the 26th verse of the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, in the 14th chapter, 26th verse, it is being mentioned about how can one become gunatit. Gunan samti त्यैतान brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate means once we cross over the gunas, sattva guna, rajo guna, and tamo guna, which is like an impurity on our consciousness, then we become Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. We become we elevate our consciousness at the level of Brahman. And how do we do that? Yo mam yo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityatan Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So by constant devotional remembrance, their consciousness became pure. Then next line is, this is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. Without deviation means yo avyabhicharena. Avyabhicharena means without any deviation, constant. Like in the definition of bhakti, we say ahetuki apratihata. Apratihata means continuous. Apratihata means continuous. So without any deviation. This abode of Lord Sri Krishna, known as Golok Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. So, if you are still having the influence of modes on our consciousness, then we cannot attain this abode of Supreme Lord Krishna. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies. In their very same bodies. So, there was no impact of Sattva Guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna, and they were elevated at the level of Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. They were as pure as Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, and they actually attained the abode of Supreme Lord Krishna. So that is the purport of this verse. Okay, we go to the 49th one. Mataji, please read.
Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhasa. Because he was absorbed in the thought of Krishna, he was received by the denizens of the Pitraloka planet, where he returned to his original post.
So after being describing by about Yudhishthir Maharaj, Kunti Devi, other Pandavas, brothers, etc., it is being mentioned how Vidur, what happened to Vidur. So there is a small difference that has been mentioned about Vidur and the Pandavas. So Pandavas are the direct eternal associates of Supreme Lord Krishna. They are direct parshads, direct eternal associates. But Vidur Maharaj is not direct eternal associate. He is actually the administrative demigod in charge of the Pitraloka planet and is known as Yamraj. So we discussed in our previous classes how Yamraj was cursed by Mandukya Muni, and because of that curse, Yamraj took birth as a Shudra in the in as Vidura. And now, when Vidura is departing, he is actually going back to his same position as Yamraj. But he's not going to the he's actually going to the Pitralok planet. Why Pitralok planet? Because his duty is there in the Pitralok planet to assist the Supreme Lord Krishna in the administrative affairs of Pitralok planet. So as Yamraj. So Yamraj has this duty of giving punishments to those who don't follow a proper way of life. So that is the difference. So Vidur Maharaj is not the direct associate. Vidur Maharaj is kind of a indirect associate who is taking charge of the administrative affairs of the universe, and he has given this role of Yamraj. So these demigods like Yamraj are also associates of the Lord, but they are not the direct personal association. They do not get the direct personal association of the Lord. So Vidura, when he returned back to his original position as Yamraj. So that is the difference between Vidura's destination and the destination of the Pandavas. Now we talk about Draupadi. Yeah.
Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands.
Same result as their husbands. So what was the result of their husband? The result of the husband was that in the same body they had gone to the spiritual world. And something similar happened to Draupadi. Draupadi also saw that her husbands were without caring for her. Without caring for her. So important point here. Without caring for her, were leaving home. So as I mentioned to you in the previous discussion, that when we are leaving, then we need to be independent. We are with our own. There is no external help. Maybe at the time of our departure, maybe possibly there are devotees surrounding us, very kindly trying to create some spiritual atmosphere for our departure. But it may not happen also. Sometimes it may not possible. Maybe if we are supposed to depart by maybe some accident or maybe some sudden kind of a incident, then it may not even happen like that. So that is what being mentioned here, that those husbands who used to care for Draupadi so much, Draupadi was under their care. Now she saw that their husbands were departing without giving any attention to how what care should be given to Draupadi. She knew well about Lord Vasudev, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. So, dear devotees, this is something which we need to learn independently without any external assistance. That we become absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and that is something which is not easy. For that, we have to practice very sincerely, very dedicatedly throughout our life, so that we can become absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna when the last moment comes in our life. That is the art of dying. Now, here, what I have been mentioning to you, and I would consider this to be the one of the most key takeaway points from the class today, and would like that we further reflect upon this point by reading this, what Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport of the 50th verse. Mataji, can you please read?
Ownership of one's spiritual life. When flying an airplane, one cannot take care of other planes. Everyone has to take care of his own plane. And if there is any danger, no other plane can help another in that condition. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. The help is power offered on the ground before flying is paid. Similarly, the spiritual master, the father, the mother, the relatives, the husband, and others can all render help during one's lifetime. But while crossing the sea, one has to take care of himself and utilize the instructions formally received.
See, such a important point, and very nicely explained with the help of an analogy of an airplane. So when we are about to fly a plane, then all the maintenance that the plane has to undergo, maybe the checkup of the engine or cleaning of the seats, whatever, XYZ, whatever, there are different activities that are done when the plane is about to uh, take off. So all that help can be taken up, will be available in the form of spiritual master, in the form of our relatives, our other devotee associates, our mother, father, husband. All of them can offer help to a certain degree in our life. But after that, Prabhupada very clearly lights that the onus or the ownership of our spiritual life is on our own. When we are crossing over the sea of this material existence, then we are on our own. Then there is no external help available. So we need to utilize the instructions that we have learned throughout our life, in performing our bhakti very seriously, and that is only going to help us at the last moment. So through this analogy, Prabhupada is very clearly mentioning uh, that external help only helps to a certain extent, but not to the last extent. Uh, like for example, if somebody is thirsty, if we can bring water to that person, we can give a glass of water to that person, but ultimately, in order to quench the thirst, the person has to drink that water all by himself. We cannot push or force that water inside the throat of a person. So similarly, the help is available only to a certain point, but ultimately we need to fly our own plane. We need to know, we need to learn how to fly our own plane when that moment comes. So because Draupadi and Subhadra understood all that point, Pandavas understood all that point, Yudhishthir Maharaj understood all that point, they absorbed themselves, they absorbed themselves in the thought of Lord Krishna and then achieved the ultimate destination. Okay. Now we come to the last verse of this section. Yeah.
The
51st.
subject of departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life.
Yeah. So this is the Falashruti of this particular chapter. If we recite this chapter, if we contemplate, meditate upon the departure of these Pandavas, the retirement of these Pandavas, and moving to the spiritual world, then it is mentioned that anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. So, hearing such katha is same as associating with the Lord and his eternal associates. And when we associate with the Lord and his eternal associates, it is like purifying our consciousness and then making the path to back to Godhead very clear and very obvious for ourselves. Okay, with that we complete the 15th chapter, and now we move or we enter into the 16th chapter. So today in this class we will try to discuss first few verses of this 16th chapter. So Anand Pradha Mataji, please continue to uh, recite the text. But before you recite the text, I will just give you an overview of this particular chapter. So you see here the 5 sections are there. First of all, we discuss about Parikshit's behaving as an ideal king, and also Parikshit encountering the Kali, who is now tormenting cow, and uh, uh, and Parikshit Maharaj, when he observes that Kali is not behaving properly with the cow, then he punishes Kali. So this is in the first section. Then after hearing this particular part, Shaunaka rishis have few questions to ask. Say, why Parikshit Maharaj did not kill Kali, why only he punished Kali, and so on. Like those, there are several questions Shaunak rishis ask. Then Sud Goswami describes the movements of Parikshit Maharaj as a conqueror. And then there is a discussion about Dharma questions to Dharani. Dharani means earth. And Dharani expresses her pain and lamentation. So these are some of the themes that we will discuss in this chapter. So today, I think we will have sufficient time to only discuss this first section. So we will discuss this one. Okay, please read, Mataji.
The Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, Maharaja Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord. Under the instructions of the best of the twice born Brahmanas, he ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth.
So if you remember in the previous chapters, we discussed when Parikshit Maharaj was born, his birth chart was shown to the astrologers, and the astrologers made very nice predictions about his qualities, about his future as a king, and so on. Now we see here that Sud Goswami is describing that Parikshit Maharaj has started to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers. So that is the reference given here. And in the purport of Prabhupada, there are certain key points which are worth remembering here, which are worth mentioning here. It is mentioned here that how did Parikshit Maharaj ruled. It is mentioned that uh, under the instructions of the best of twice born Brahmanas, under the instructions of the best of twice born Brahmanas. So with this, we see this arrangement of rule of administration by the kings, Raj Rishis, all over in Vedic literature. Even Dasharath Maharaj would rule the kingdom of Ayodhya with the help of expert ministers and sages. And it is being mentioned here, the qualities of those expert ministers and sages is being mentioned in Ramayana in great detail. So something similar model of ruling and administrating a kingdom is being mentioned here as well. And Prabhupada would say that there were great sages and learned Brahmanas. And what was the specific quality of these Brahmanas and great sages? That they would not take any remuneration, any salary from the king. So what do you think would possibly happen when these Brahmanas and sages would not take any salary from the king? What, in your opinion, is the importance of this point? Any guesses from the devotees? Anyone would like to guess what would be the consequence of that? That if
It
a
is
minister,
Knowledge was not
other
for
common
sale.
people took care of them.
Okay, Vasudevan Prabhu, can you repeat that? Sorry.
No, no, I said it shows that the common people, other grihasthas,
Hmm.
took care of the sannyasis and Brahmins by offering them food, by offering them offerings, etc.
Okay, but how does it connect with the uh, good administration of a kingdom? I mean, that is certainly correct that the Brahmanas would survive
Yeah, so
mainly on their
then
donations.
if the Brahmanas and sadhus are taking remuneration from the king, then they become indebted to please the king. And so
Ha,
they are not able to give them the right advice. Since they
correct.
didn't agree, they could give them objective advice on what to do, what not to
Yeah.
do.
So because they have no dependence on the king, because they had no dependence on the king, they would feel free, fair. They will provide free, fair, unbiased advice to the king. Because if they would take salary, they would actually would like to please the king. What is in the favor of king? What king actually wants to hear from them, not the welfare of the kingdom will be at their heart, rather the welfare of the king will be at their heart, because they will think that ultimately from whom our home is running, ultimately from where our salary is coming, it is the king. So we should rather please the king rather than taking care of the welfare of the people at large. We should rather take care of the welfare of the king at large. So that is why these ministers would not take salary from the king, and so that they could actually offer free, fair, and unbiased advice to the king, which is actually for the welfare of the citizens, not for the welfare of the king. So that is very good. That is the main objective of this point. Yeah. Okay. Now we move to the second one. Yeah.
King Parikshit married the daughter of King Uttara, and they got 4 sons headed by Maharaja Janmeja.
Hmm. So now another detail is being mentioned, that he married daughter of King Uttar. Hmm. So King Uttar is who? King Uttar is actually the son of King Virat. And uh, who is Parikshit Maharaj's mother? Who is Parikshit Maharaj's mother?
Uttara,
Uttara. So Virat had one son called Uttar and one daughter called Uttara. So Uttar and Uttara, very rhyming names. So Parikshit Maharaj married the daughter of King Uttar. So by relationship, who is Uttar to Parikshit? What is there a relationship between Uttar and Parikshit? So Uttar is
Mama.
Parikshit Maharaj, yeah, Mama. Parikshit Maharaj's mother's brother. So he's actually Mama. Now it might seem a little unusual to devotees that Parikshit Maharaj marrying the daughter of his Mama, and the name of the daughter of his Mama is given in Bhagavatam, which is Iravati. So Iravati was the daughter of his Parikshit Maharaj's Mama. So Prabhupada clarifies this point in the purport, and he says that if Mama's Gotra is different from your Gotra, then it is okay to marry Mama's daughter also. And that was the convention in the Vedic times. And he supports his point by giving one another example, where he says that Arjuna married Subhadra, who was also Arjuna's Mama's daughter. So something like a cousin sister. But uh, in Vedic times, if the Gotra is different, then the marriage between Mama's daughter and the person can actually take place. And then in the purport, Prabhupada also gives an elaborate description about Maharaj Janmajaya. There are several interesting things mentioned about Maharaj Janmajaya. Maybe you can read that on your own time. I will not go into that detail. But Janmajaya life was also being mentioned in the Bhagavatam as a very very virtuous king. He was also a very virtuous king. Okay, move to the third one. Yes, Mataji.
Maharaja Parikshit, after having selected Kripacharya for guidance as his spiritual master, performed 3 horse sacrifices on the banks of the Ganges. These were executed with sufficient rewards for the attendants, and at these sacrifices, even the common man could see demigods.
Hmm. So what important is here that he is also under the guidance of a spiritual master, performed some Ashwamedha Yajna. And a little more interesting thing is that when he was performing those Ashwamedha Yajna, then the demigods from the heavens will actually come to receive the result of the sacrifice, the outcome of the sacrifice. And when these demigods will come, the common man could also see the demigods. Nowadays, demigods don't come in this Kali Yuga, but even then, when Maharaj Parikshit was present, demigods would rarely be visible to the common man. But it was mainly because of the dharmic potency of Parikshit Maharaj that uh, when the demigods will come to receive the result of the sacrifice, the common people could also see those demigods. So it was mainly because of the virtuous kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj. And then when the kings will perform these elaborate sacrifices, they will donate wealth profusely. And when they will donate wealth profusely to the subjects, the subjects will remain satisfied. Like we see in the present context, the prime minister of the country going to a place and then announcing a lot of welfare schemes and so on. So when the kings will announce these kind of welfare schemes, the subjects will remain very satisfied, and the kingdom will be very peaceful and prosperous. Okay, now we come to the last verse of the class today. Yeah.
Once, when Maharaja Parikshit was on his way to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Shudra, disguised as a king and herding the legs of a cow and bull. The king at once got hold of him to deal sufficient punishment.
Hmm. So the discussion is moving now to more interesting themes and topics. Here it is being mentioned that once when he was on the world tour, he observed something which was really uh, unheard of, unseenable, and in those Vedic times. And what was that? That a person is tormenting a cow. So such was a strong Vedic culture at the time of King Parikshit, that providing any slightest of harm to a cow will be seen with lot of disdain, will be seen with lot of disrespect. And to the extent that the person who is giving some harm to a cow could even be given a death sentence. To that extent it can go. But here uh, what is being mentioned here is that King Parikshit was on a way to conquer the world. So it might appear to us that when it is mentioned that he's on the way to conquer the world, it is mainly because of his self glorification or self aggrandizement. No, King Parikshit was a Rajrishi, and although he was a Samrat like Yudhishthir Maharaj, and he was on a world tour mainly because he wanted to ensure those kingdoms who are under his control are actually not deviating from the path of dharma. So many of the kingdoms will automatically accept King Parikshit's rule as a Samrat, but some kingdoms who are not accepting rule of King Parikshit as Samrat would make Parikshit Maharaj would make sure that those kingdoms would also follow the right way of kingdom, right way of administration, and so on. And in order to establish that rule of dharmic rule, he would take these to the world tour in order to bring everything in order. And while he was on such tour, he would see that one person who was not even a Shudra, he was even lower than a Shudra. Now, who is a Shudra? So we understand who is a Brahmana. Brahmana is typically in the mode of goodness with little mode of passion. Who is Kshatriya? Kshatriya is primarily in the mode of passion but little goodness. The Kshatriya, the Vaishyas are in mostly in mode of Rajoguna, in mode of passion, but little mode of ignorance, Tamoguna. And Shudra is primarily in mode of ignorance, but little bit of mode of passion is also there. So with that kind of a consciousness of person, he was even not even a Shudra, that person, this Kali. But this Kali was disguised as a king. Disguised as a king. On this point, Prabhupada mentioned in the purport that in today's world, the main cause of dissatisfaction, main cause of anarchy, main cause of disturbance in the society is that those people who are even lower than the consciousness of a Shudra have actually taken up to the a position of political power. They have become prime ministers, or they have become elevated in the society, in terms of administrating the society, and that is the main reason why there is so much dissatisfaction in the society. So a similar person had disguised as a king, and he was hurting the legs of a cow and a bull, and the king could not tolerate this, because at those Vedic times, hurting a cow was unheard of, and if somebody would hurt a cow, he could even get a punishment as high as a death sentence. So this is something which King Parikshit observed, and immediately he punished this person called Kali. And what happened after that? The sages of Naimisharanya actually asked further questions. Why did King Parikshit did not kill this person? Why he only punished this cow? And for that, we will continue our discussion in our next class. So till then, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Any thoughts? Any takeaway points? We are happy to discuss. Any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments?
Just one thought is coming to me, Prabhuji. I
Yes,
don't
Mataji.
know. Our country has always respected the cows and calling her mother cow, cow mata. And still, the pathetic condition today is we are slaughtering it legally.
Organizing
Legally, it is
in an
done.
organized way with
Organized way.
the sanction of the authorities.
Yeah. So when and how we fell down to such low mentality, that is very questionable.
So
Isn't
when
it?
and how means you can already see that when the Kali comes, all these effects start to manifest. And now only
Yeah.
5,000 years have passed, and you see the condition, and you can
Yeah.
only imagine what is going to happen as it becomes even darker.
Yes, definitely.
So we need to put our seat belts of Krishna consciousness, and uh, be ready to move as soon as possible from this age of Kali.
Yes, Prabhuji. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the class.
Yes.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Mataji. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
joining.
Prabhu.
Yes. Thank
Thank you,
you,
Prabhu.
Rakesh. Okay. Thank you, Jayanti Mataji. Thank you very much. Okay. See you in the next class. Thank you.
The concept
Hare
of self-effort was very well explained. So there is no free lunch. We have
Correct.
to carry our own load.
Own load. Yes. That is the main
And,
takeaway point. That is the main takeaway point. I think Shiban Prabhu rightly mentioned it. Ultimately, association will help only to a certain extent, but we have to fly our own plane. We have to drive our own car when the time comes.
You cannot quench hunger by looking at food. You have to put
Yeah.
it in the stomach.
Correct. Correct. So thank you very much for mentioning that. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Dandavad.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna
Prabhu.
Guruji,
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Dandavad.
Dandavad.
Can I have a comment?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, please. Yes. Okay.
So it reminds me again the Gita Bhagavatam, Gita classes, Bhagavad Gita, that hearing, chanting, and then teaching. These are the three steps to reach to the to the
Yes,
forehead of
certainly.
Godhead.
Shravanam
So
Kirtanam is very important,
yeah.
and we should do it something in a very regular way, like we eat our food. Something in a similar way, we need to do our Shravanam and Kirtanam in a very dedicated manner. Yes.
So it reassures that quite a bit. Teaching
Right.
helps a lot, but it is a self, labor,
Conviction.
self-conviction,
commitment,
yes, is
ownership,
the most
ownership
important.
of our spiritual life. Yeah.
Ji Guruji, thank you very much.
Thank
It
you.
was the basic takeaway point.
Hmm.
So people who cannot read and write, at least they can listen.
Correct.
So hearing itself will help us to reach to the foot of
Ultimate
the
goal.
Godhead.
Yeah.
Ji Guruji.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Guruji.
Thank you. Ji. Hare Krishna.
Dandavad Guruji.
Dandavad.
Hare Krishna to all.
Hare
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Happy
Hare
New
Krishna.
Year to
Happy
all.
New Year, Prabhuji. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Yeah, sorry, Guruji. I forgot to wish all the devotees.
Yeah, yeah.
And to
Thank
my
you.
Guruji, happy, prosperous, healthy
Happy New Year.
New
Prabhuji.
Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to all.
Happy New Year. Haji.
Happy